Hello everyone, Star Saber here again. I've had another video request for a roster review. Today we're going to go ahead and review Anders' roster. And this is something that actually brings up an important point that I want to go over in advance. Now, roster sizes, it can be a good thing to have it get bigger, and it can be a bad thing. Now, if you're near a 500,000 threshold, um, obviously adding to it will make your roster look bigger. But there's one risk associated with that, and that's in Grand Arena. Grand Arena is tiered in a way that the number of places you have on defense will change every time it goes up. Now, I am in a bracket where pretty much the heaviest of the heaviest hitters out there, probably the ones who know how to hack the system to operate. I mean, I was full cleared, one shotted every single one of my teams here. And it happened, I think, before I even logged on yesterday to look after the phase started. I've never been a big fan of Grand Arena, and this is a huge reason why right here. My roster is very large, but it's not very specifically tailored to handle things like Grand Arena. And not that people have hacks like putting their best mods on every single player and every single team out there that they've discovered for the Grand Arena purposes. I've never really been that into it anyway. Maybe it's related. Maybe it's they're better skilled than me. I don't really know for sure. I just don't worry about it that much because Grand Arena, I barely even have time for. I know some game changers love it and will show tournaments. Me, not so much. I could care less about Grand Arena because whenever I run into most of my opponents here, it's either not a fair fight in their favor or it's not a fair fight in my favor. And I can just full clear my opponents in the same way that these guys full clear me. I've only occasionally had a really challenging situation where I felt like I had a chance to win, but and when I did win, but it felt like it was a struggle. So I'm not a big fan of Grand Arena, but I know a lot of you are, and I know a lot of you are succeeding. And the reason I bring this up is when I'm looking at Anders specifically. And this actually applies to JCX a little bit too. Now, when you look at Anders' inventory, oops, he just popped over 3.5 million galactic power, and I think that was due to his modding. But when I looked at this earlier today, he was actually under 3.5, so he can literally strip down his mods and go into Grand Arena a little bit lighter and go into a lighter or lighter bracket for his challengers that he faces. So that's just something to consideration. The other reason I'll bring this up, Anders specifically, this is also applicable to both my previous reviews. He's very top heavy. He's got a lot of strength in the upper tiers, all the meta characters. I mean, he's got, I would say, I think he's got even more gold than JCX does, nominally. And you can see a lot of that in his raid performance. Anders is a notoriously dedicated raider. He always has been. Even when we first got here, he always used to, if he missed a single heroic rank or raid because he was lacking Han Solo back then, our guild was pretty much on farm then, but when he came into the guild, he didn't. He and Lone Wolf, they weren't getting it so often, so we gave them a chance, and he liked to raid all ever since, and he still does. You'll see him if he always gets in on all the heroic tank raids, and he always is, if not the highest, he's one of the highest performance in the Sith raid. He's a big raider. I mean, I'm honestly impressed that his wife has stayed married to him all this time because he's the type where he could probably, if a raid's going on, he will completely ignore his wife who brought a hot Swedish model into the bedroom with him and they're wearing pretty lingerie trying to invite him. He's like, no, I'm too busy. At least I think that's the case anyway. I like to give him a hard time about it because he loves raiding. He's absolutely loves to raid, and he loves a lot of aspects of this game. And you can see that in his roster because he's improved it a great deal. I mean, overall, this is a good example of how to really dedicate your assets and not to grow especially wasteful on things that aren't really helping you. Now, he can grow it bigger very easily. He's got a few, kind of like our previous reviews. He's got a few level ones. Some of these may be worth doing. I would say B1 Battle Droid and Droidica would probably be good investments for him. I would go and Range Trooper as well, Kira as well, Base Malbus as well. He's got some strength down here at level 1 that are actually very strong characters, and Enfys Nest as well. There are some things he can bring up, and that's up to him. Short Trooper is another example. These are all characters that would be good to level eventually. B2 Super Battle Droid. But there's a cost associated with that. Not only cost in credits, but it also will elevate his galactic power pretty quickly, and he could very easily push himself into borderline. Right now he's borderline 3.5. He could very easily push himself into borderline 4.0 million. And what that will do is that'll make it even more difficult to pull. So the cost associated with that is his Grand Arenas will be even harder. He'll be even closer to where I'm at. And where I'm at, I barely even bother. Sometimes I'll even log on and look at the results. Sometimes I'll just accept the rewards in the inbox. It's just that bad for me. And maybe some people feel differently. Some people who've invested more time in modding their backup teams and things like that. It could be skill, and it could be time dedication related why I'm losing a lot of these battles, and it probably is to some extent. But the level of interest for me just isn't there. I can recommend good teams. I can theory craft with anyone, but it's just a matter of actual gameplay enjoyment. I just don't enjoy that particular game mode so much. So that's one of the caveats there. All in all, though, Anders has dedicated a lot of time into gearing and to getting Zetas on good characters. He asks a lot of questions. If you've been monitoring line chat for a while now, he's one of the more curious people who ask a lot of questions about where he should focus next, what types of things to gear, what would be the next best Zeta, what would be useful, and all these types of questions. And you can see it in the lineups. He's very stacked in a lot of different good characters, things that are valuable. And he's got pretty much all the Zetas for each of these characters. You can tell he's done a very focused approach to his roster. I would say all in all, it's been time well spent for him. He's not spending a lot of his resources doing frivolous things necessarily. However, it's costing him in some ways too, because he would have gotten a little more. He might have gotten a 6-star Padme out of it if he invested more time in his droids and Grievous. Maybe not. It's hard to say. It's a hypothetical situation. Eventually, there will be a point where you'll want to bring up some of these characters because you got some good ones that just aren't reaching their full potential here. And Enfys Nest is one that really comes to mind. Embo also really comes to mind. Range Trooper, Range Trooper is extremely good with your Imperial troopers. It makes a Veers-led troopers team much, much better to have the Range Trooper in the squad because everyone just starts firing, calling to assist during their turn when buffs are up. So it's a great replacement for often people put Death Trooper in that team. So that's just something to think about. It's not a hard and solid you shall do this rule. It's just something to think about how to vary up here. Now, the way his ships are set up, he's clearly not invested as much time in his arena as I can see. He's currently ranked number 1 as to his ships. He's not doing too badly, don't get me wrong. 74 is not a insignificant achievement, but you can tell he's put less time. He's put some time in the Houndstooth, which is good. That's something he wants to do. He's got the fully maxed out reinforcement ability as Phantom 2. That's also important because that gives you the ability to call Phantom 2, and then next turn the capital ship gets turned again. You'll already bring in one more ship. You can field 5 ships a lot quicker, and that can turn the battle very quickly in a ship's fight. You can also see he's invested a little bit of time and some resources into his bounty hunters and New Blood and 2000. Might be worth spending some more and getting yourself that Falcon. Millennium Falcon is going to be the difference between where you are now, more than likely, and getting in the top 10 or even number 1. I mean, it's been probably, whereas arenas kind of varied, Ships Arena, I've been able to get number one for, I would say, going on a year now. Maybe more so than that. It's hard to keep track at this point. But I would focus on that. I would also take a look at your home one's already at 85, so really it's pretty much there. So you don't need to do a lot to it. You got all the abilities to, by the looks of things. And in fact, if you can get that Millennium Falcon, I'd say that would improve your ship's game considerably, because really all you gotta do is farm away at that Zendu Blood A2000. Your main roster is actually pretty good right now. So I'm going to make a little bit of the same recommendation as I've made in the past. See if you can bump up your ship's performance. A lot of Zetas to be gotten that way, just from getting that 17 or 1800 ship store credits that you can put towards getting Zetas. Literally, with a little bit of a break in there, I get a Zeta pretty much every single day from Ship Arena. So that's something to consider. And then you add that on top of the other sources that you can get. You can pull a lot of Zetas that way. And you're doing okay, don't get me wrong. And as far as whether or not you want to bring up the low stuff, and the same goes for JCX, I would just consider when you look at it, are you going to push those thresholds? Do you think that will hamper your Grand Arena performance significantly, or do you just want to go ahead and go with it? I mean, eventually you're going to add new characters to your roster anyway. You're not going to be able to go over-under on your galactic power thresholds regardless, but it's something to think about where you're at right now and have a plan for that future. Like I said, this one's very well tuned at the upper levels and a whole lot of Gear 12 characters in his roster. That's very apparent. Now, some weaknesses potentially. Doesn't look like you're especially set up well for Darth Revan yet. I don't think you have Darth Revan yet, if I'm not mistaken, which is fine. It's just something that you want to consider over time because it is the meta right now, and your Canderous is a little lower, I noticed, and some of your other Old Republic characters are probably holding you up here. And if you eventually want to keep competitive in the arena, I've given you some tips to stay competitive from where you're at right now, but you might want to take a look at your Canderous, bringing that up a little bit more, taking a look at your Juhani and your Cartha Nasi, because they've clearly been less focused on, and maybe you already are. It's just something to think about. If you want to continue on that path, you're going to need to invest some more time in your Cartha Nasi and your Juhani, and you're going to have to build up the gear on your Canderous to be able to be effectively operate in that vicinity. HK is very good, though, so that's at least ready for something. You're just not able to fully utilize it yet at this point. You don't have any Zetas, which is fine. I wouldn't rush to that until you're a little closer to getting a Darth Revan in your inventory, and probably at least at the 6. Well, I mean, I guess never mind. He comes in at 7 stars, so you're going to need to keep focusing on your Old Republic tunes to get there. But those are some considerations here. So I'd say all in all, you're at a point where you're very well set up to perform very well in a lot of different areas, and I don't think that's come as an accident. I think you've worked very hard for it, and it's paid off. Looking at your modding strategy, I can tell you've also been listening pretty well to some of the things I've been telling you, because you got great speed on your Revan, and you actually have a little bit more offensively than I bring to the table, for instance, for mine. So you're a little slower, but that's pretty common. I mean, I'm fast enough. Like, people can go faster, but you got a respectable speed, good, decent potency, good tenacity. You got a good all-around Revan here, and you don't even use speed mods on it. So do you want to head that route in the future? Sure, you could. You'll have to make the decisions. Is the cost worth the gains? You're just going to have to make those decisions, play around with it. If you don't like the results, you can always go back and you can keep the mod set available to go back to if what you try and experiment with doesn't work out. But I'd say pretty good setup, Generate Rev in there. Grandmaster Yoda, I know you've been working on him quite a bit there. And you've put a lot of focus into some key stuff as well. Very high speed. That's something that'll gain you some benefit. Is it too high? Yes, no, maybe. Hard to say. Got a boosted critical damage. Now, obviously, you could pull even more if you got a critical damage set on this character, but you'll have to ask yourself, is it worth sacrificing some of these other stats for, or do you like having the stats you currently have, keeping the potency pretty decent, your tenacity pretty decent? You don't have a lot of offense. That's, I would say, your key weakness in your Grandmaster Yoda. You've got 298 physical damage added and 434 special damage added. That's really not a lot for Grandmaster Yodas. So what you're probably seeing to some extent when you're playing is your Grandmaster Yoda may hit a little bit like a wet noodle compared to what you may be up against out there. And I don't think it's too pronounced, but if you feel like you're not getting a good return on his hits, that would be my suggestion to address it. Looking at your Bastila is set up pretty well as well. Very good speed. About where I operate mine, even better protection. And I will throw this in there about health and protections. It's very important people understand that if you get protection up from abilities, it's based on your base health. It's not based on your or your max health, not your max protection. So while having a lot of protection initially will help you most undoubtedly, if you're looking at benefiting from protection up capabilities, actually health is more important. So while you're sitting there in the almost 12,000 range total, once your protection goes away, it's almost gone, and you're not getting a lot of the benefits of protection up abilities. That's just one cautionary for you, especially if you move your Bastila Shan to a leadership position. You're getting more bang for your buck from the max health than your max protection. So just things to keep in mind as you do this. And one other thing I like to look for on Bastila that I wasn't, but looking at your potency. Your potency is kind of low. Not super important. Her first ability does have a bonus potency for active Jedi allies, so you can get a lot of bonus potency that way. But those spell blocks, that can be a big difference maker sometimes in the right time you need it. Looking at your Jolee Bindo here, you've been investing pretty good on survivability and speed. Could do a little bit better there. You want him to be as tanky as you can, and if I was going to focus on it, I would focus on getting him the plus health and a little bit less of the critical damage, things like that. But try to max out his health as high as you can, because then you're more annoying to take out, and you're going to fall a little more slowly on the between when you're not in your payout period. Now your General Kenobi, we're looking at him. I know you've done some mod changing since we asked about for this. Again, you seem to be favoring a lot of protection over health, and sometimes your stats are just going to play out that way. Pretty good speed. I would say that I don't have any huge complaints, and you got pretty good tenacity on your General Kenobi as well, which can be important because obviously if you can't throw up that taunt, he's just kind of there until you call to assist or things like that, so, or do a buff clear. So you want to try to make him resist some of those key debuff abilities too. So I would say you've done a pretty good job of setting yourself up. I would say in the grand scheme of things, if you want to get a better return on your investment really needs to be on your ships and getting them to the point where you can get into top 50 and then top 20, top 10, and then start working for that number one spot, because you will get a good return on your investment eventually. It's just a matter of getting everything there. And so things like take a look at, in the meantime, getting your Cassian's U-Wing, um, getting all the reinforcement abilities there. That's one I didn't mention on the other two videos. But as far as getting your ships ready to go against the Falcon, Cassian's U-Wing is currently the most accessible way to go about it. You can also get similar results from the Ebon Hawk, which I don't think, doesn't look like you have, but um, that's not as easy to bring up anyway. Cassian's U-Wing can be a huge difference maker in battles against the Millennium Falcon, because when that reinforcement ability comes in, you'll be able to, instead of just entering the battle and dispel all buffs of the target enemy, you'll be able to clear the whole team, and that includes the Millennium Falcon's masking capability, and you'll be able to target the Falcon directly, take it out. For the meantime, what I recommend, I see you've got TIE Silencer and your lineup at the front. What I would do with this setup here is target Falcon first. If you can pull it off and take out the Falcon before it can mask itself, you may be able to control the edge of the battle. It's tougher to do. I think it's going to be RNG and gear dependent, but that might get you some points and get you a little higher in the fleet ranking. So by the time your payout comes along, you'll be able to get those higher reward blocks and be able to. It pays off in the long run, trust me. I can tell you, after a year plus of getting in the 1800 range, it has paid off huge dividends in the amount of characters I've been able to Zeta. So that would be my key advice for you at this point. But for now, just keep doing what you're doing. Keep raiding like a man obsessed. And keep interacting, asking questions. All in all, I mean, as much as a hard time I like to tease you, I don't tease people I don't like. I just don't even deal with them. The only reason I tease you as much as I do is because I like you a lot. I like having you as an officer. You've done a fantastic job for this guild, and I want you to keep doing what you're doing. And